On Christmas, my son locked me outside during a snowstorm. I trembled and cried without a blanket. Through the window, I saw everyone smiling and toasting, including his mother-in-law. Until the gardener appeared and told me 3 revealing words: subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. My name is Sandra, and I'm 65 years old. I never imagined that the worst betrayal of my life would come from my own son on Christmas Eve, during the worst snowstorm our town had seen in 20 years. The evening started like any other holiday gathering. I had spent the entire day preparing dinner, just like I had for the past 40 years. The turkey was perfectly golden, the stuffing seasoned exactly how Thomas liked it, and I had even made Rebecca's favorite cranberry sauce from scratch. Despite how she always found something to criticize about my cooking, Thomas arrived with Rebecca and their 2 children around 5 in the afternoon. Rebecca's mother, Margaret, came with them, wearing that superior smile she always reserved for me. She had never liked me, not since the day Thomas announced our engagement 38 years ago. To her, I wasn't good enough for her precious son-in-law, even though Thomas was my son, not hers. "Sandra, darling," Margaret said as she walked through my front door without waiting to be invited in. "I hope you remembered not to oversalt the potatoes this year." I bit my tongue, as I had learned to do over the years. "Everything is prepared just as you like it, Margaret." The dinner went as expected. Rebecca barely touched her food, making subtle comments about how heavy everything tasted. Thomas seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone and exchanging meaningful glances with his wife. Margaret dominated the conversation, telling stories about her other daughter's successful Christmas party the night before. "Of course, Patricia's house is so much more suitable for entertaining," Margaret said, cutting her turkey into precise small pieces. "The dining room can seat 20 people comfortably. Not like this cozy little space." I felt the familiar sting but said nothing. This was my home, the house where I had raised Thomas, where his father and I had built our life together before cancer took him 8 years ago. It might not be a mansion, but it was filled with love and memories. After dinner, as I began clearing the table, Thomas suddenly stood up. "Mom, we need to talk." Something in his tone made my stomach clench. Rebecca was smiling, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile you give when you know something others don't. "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked, setting down the plates I was carrying. "It's about your condition," Thomas said, not meeting my eyes. "My condition?" I felt confused. "What condition?" Rebecca leaned forward, her voice dripping with false concern. "Sandra, we've all noticed how forgetful you've become lately. The way you repeat yourself, how you sometimes forget where you put things." My heart started racing. "I don't know what you mean." "I'm fine." "Mom," Thomas said, finally looking at me, "last month you called me 3 times asking if I was coming to dinner, even though we had already confirmed it. And you left the stove on twice in the past few weeks," Rebecca added. "Mrs. Henderson from next door mentioned she smelled gas and had to come check on you." I stared at them, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. "Those were just small mistakes. Everyone makes them." Margaret set down her wine glass with a sharp clink. "Sandra, denial is the first sign of cognitive decline. My grandmother went through the same thing. We think," Thomas continued, his voice getting stronger, "that it would be best if you considered alternative living arrangements. Somewhere with professional care." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You want to put me in a nursing home?" "It's an assisted living facility," Rebecca corrected, pulling out a glossy brochure from her purse. "Very nice. We've already toured it." I felt tears burning my eyes. "You toured it without me?" "We wanted to make sure it was suitable before getting your hopes up," Thomas said, but he still wouldn't look directly at me. I shook my head vigorously. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my home." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Rebecca and Margaret exchanged a look, and Thomas's jaw tightened. "Mom, you're being unreasonable," he said, his voice harder now. "We're trying to help you." "I don't need help," I said, my voice rising. "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself." "Are you?" Margaret asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because from where I sit, it looks like you're living in denial." The argument that followed was unlike anything I had ever experienced with my son. Voices were raised, harsh words were spoken, and through it all, the grandchildren sat silently in the living room, probably hearing every word. Finally, Thomas stood up abruptly. "I need some air," he announced. "We all do," Rebecca said, rising as well. "Come on, kids. Let's get our coats." I watched in disbelief as my entire family put on their winter clothes and walked toward the front door. "Where are you going?" I called after them. "We haven't even had dessert yet." Thomas paused at the door, his hand on the knob. "We'll be back, Mom. We just need to cool down." And then they were gone, leaving me standing alone in my dining room, surrounded by dirty dishes and half-eaten food, but they didn't come back. Not in 10 minutes, not in 30. I kept watching through the front window, expecting to see Thomas's car pull back into the driveway. Instead, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Thomas was in the backyard, doing something to the back door. I rushed to the kitchen window and watched as he appeared to be jamming something into the lock mechanism. "Thomas," I called out, knocking on the window. "What are you doing?" He looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Something cold and calculating. Then he walked away, disappearing around the side of the house. I tried the back door. It wouldn't budge. I tried the front door, and my worst fears were confirmed. It was locked from the outside, and my key wouldn't turn. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. My own son had locked me out of my house in the middle of a snowstorm. I pounded on the front door, shouting for Thomas, for anyone. But through the frosted glass, I could see the warm glow of lights inside, could hear the faint sounds of laughter and conversation. They had gone back inside through some other entrance, and they were continuing their Christmas celebration without me. The snow was falling harder now, and the wind was picking up. I was wearing only a light sweater and house slippers. I had no coat, no hat, no gloves. The cold was already seeping through my clothes, making my bones ache. I tried every door, every window on the first floor. Everything was locked tight. As I stumbled around to the side of the house, shivering uncontrollably now, I could see into the dining room through a gap in the curtains. There they were, Thomas, Rebecca, Margaret, and the children, sitting around my table, eating my Christmas cookies, drinking my coffee, laughing as if nothing had happened. As if I didn't exist. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that for a moment I forgot about the cold. This wasn't just about a nursing home. This was something else entirely. Something that had been planned. As I stood there in the falling snow, watching my family celebrate my absence, I realized that my son, the boy I had raised, loved, and sacrificed for, had just left me to die. I don't know how long I stood there in the snow, watching my family through that window. Time seemed to stop as the cold seeped deeper into my bones. My fingers had gone numb, and I could no longer feel my feet in the thin house slippers that were now soaked through. The wind was howling now, driving the snow horizontally across the yard. I tried to find shelter against the side of the house, but there was nowhere to hide from the storm. My teeth were chattering so violently I thought they might crack. I kept thinking this had to be a mistake, some kind of misunderstanding. Surely Thomas would realize what he had done and come looking for me. Surely my own son wouldn't leave me to freeze to death on Christmas Eve. But as the minutes ticked by and hypothermia began to set in, I started to accept a horrible truth. This wasn't an accident. My vision was starting to blur when I heard footsteps crunching through the snow behind me. I turned, hoping desperately to see Thomas coming to rescue me, to tell me this had all been some terrible mistake. Instead, I saw Miguel. Miguel Herrera had been my gardener and handyman for nearly 20 years. He was a quiet man in his 50s, with kind eyes and gentle hands that could make anything grow. He lived in a small apartment above the garage, an arrangement that had worked perfectly for both of us since his wife passed away 5 years ago. "Mrs. Sandra?" His voice was filled with alarm as he rushed toward me. "What are you doing out here?" I tried to answer, but my lips were too numb to form words properly. All that came out was a garbled sob. Miguel immediately shrugged off his heavy winter coat and wrapped it around my shoulders. The warmth was shocking against my frozen skin. "Come," he said, putting his arm around me to support my weight. "My place. Quickly." He half carried me up the stairs to his small apartment above the garage. Once inside, he sat me down in front of his space heater and began rubbing my hands and feet to restore circulation. The pain his feeling returned to my extremities was excruciating, but Miguel was patient and gentle. "Why were you outside?" he asked as he wrapped a blanket around me and handed me a cup of hot tea. "In this storm?" I started to cry then, really cry, as the full weight of what had happened crashed over me. "Thomas locked me out," I whispered. "My own son locked me out of my house." Miguel's face darkened. He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his own cup of tea. Then he looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes, not surprise, but a kind of grim confirmation. "Mrs. Sandra," he said quietly, "there's something you need to know." The way he said it sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the cold. "What is it, Miguel?" He set down his cup and leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "They planned everything." Those 3 words hit me harder than the freezing wind had. "What do you mean?" Miguel glanced toward the window, as if making sure no one could hear us, then continued. "For weeks now, I've been hearing conversations. When they think no one is around, when they think I'm just the gardener who doesn't matter." My heart was pounding. "What kind of conversations?" "About you, Mrs. Sandra. About your house, your money, your mind." He paused, seeming to struggle with whether to continue. They want to have you declared mentally incompetent. The room spun around me. That's impossible. Is it? Miguel asked gently. Think about the things they mentioned tonight. The phone calls, the stove, Mrs. Henderson, and the gas smell. I stared at him. But those things really happened, did they? He asked. Because I live right here, Mrs. Sandra. I would smell gas. From the main house. There was no gas leak. The implications of what he was saying crashed over me like a wave. Are you saying they lied? I'm saying they created evidence, Miguel said carefully. Mrs. Rebecca, she visited Mrs. Henderson last month. Had a long conversation with her about how worried the family was about your memory. I felt sick. Rebecca talked to my neighbor? She planted the story, Mrs. Sandra. Made Mrs. Henderson believe she had smelled gas when she hadn't. My mind was reeling. But the phone calls to Thomas, check your phone records, Miguel suggested. I bet you'll find you called him once, not 3 times. I pulled my phone from my pocket with shaking hands and scrolled through my call log. Miguel was right. I had called Thomas exactly once that day, at 2 in the afternoon. They're building a case, Miguel continued. Making people believe you're losing your mind so they can take control of everything. But why would Thomas do this to me? The question came out as a broken whisper. Miguel's expression grew even more serious. Because Mrs. Rebecca has been filling his head with ideas. About how much this house is worth, about your savings account, about what they could do with that money. I thought about Rebecca's comments during dinner, about how my house wasn't suitable for entertaining, about how Patricia's house was so much better. She wants my house. She wants everything, Mrs. Sandra. The house, the savings, the insurance policy. And Mrs. Margaret, she's been helping. Encouraging them. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. My own son. Miguel reached over and took my hand. There's more. I wasn't sure I could handle more, but I needed to know the truth. Tell me. Tonight wasn't supposed to be just about locking you out, he said quietly. I heard them talking this afternoon while you were cooking. They hoped the cold would take care of their problem permanently. The words hung in the air between us like poison. You're saying they wanted me to die out there? Miguel nodded grimly. An elderly woman with memory problems, wandering outside in a snowstorm on Christmas Eve. Very tragic. Very believable. I felt like I was falling into an abyss. How long have you known? I started putting the pieces together about a month ago, Miguel admitted. Little things at first. The way Mrs. Rebecca would ask me questions about your daily routine, about your habits. The way Mr. Thomas started talking about your condition to neighbors. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Miguel looked ashamed. I hoped I was wrong. I hoped I was seeing things that weren't there. You've been so kind to me, Mrs. Sandra. You've treated me like family for 20 years. I didn't want to believe your own son could do this to you. I thought about all the years I had worked to provide for Thomas, all the sacrifices I had made to give him a good life. I had worked 2 jobs to put him through college, had given him everything I had. There's something else, Miguel said, interrupting my thoughts. I looked up at him, wondering what other horrors he might reveal. They plan to move fast, he said. After Christmas, they're filing papers to have you evaluated by a doctor. A doctor Mrs. Margaret knows personally. The full scope of their plan was becoming clear. They had thought of everything, covered every angle, except for one thing they hadn't counted on. Miguel had been watching, listening, and remembering everything. As I sat there in Miguel's small, warm apartment, watching the snow continue to fall outside, I realized that this good, quiet man had just saved my life in more ways than one. But the question now was, what was I going to do about it? I spent that night in Miguel's apartment, wrapped in blankets and trying to process the devastating truth he had revealed. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Thomas's cold stare through the kitchen window, Rebecca's satisfied smile, Margaret's superior smirk. My own family had orchestrated what they hoped would be my death. The next morning, Christmas Day, Miguel made me coffee and toast while we watched my house through his window. Thomas's car was still in the driveway, which meant they had stayed the night in my house. In my bed, probably. How much more do you know? I asked Miguel as we sat at his small kitchen table. He was quiet for a moment, then got up and went to a wooden box on his dresser. I started writing things down, he said, bringing the box back to the table. Dates, times, conversations I overheard. Inside the box were dozens of small notebooks, the kind you buy at the dollar store. Miguel opened one from about 6 weeks ago and began reading. November 15th, he read aloud. Mrs. Rebecca asked me if you ever seemed confused about money. Asked if you ever forgot to pay me or paid me twice. I remembered that day. Rebecca had come over for lunch, which was unusual since she rarely visited unless she wanted something. November 22nd, Miguel continued. Mr. Thomas asked me if you had been acting strangely. Said he was worried about your health. December 3rd, he read from another notebook. Mrs. Margaret called while you were at the grocery store. Asked me detailed questions about your daily routine. What time you wake up, when you go to bed, whether you take medication. Each entry was like a piece of a puzzle falling into place. They had been gathering information, building their case against my mental competency for weeks. December 10th, Miguel's voice grew quieter. Overheard Mrs. Rebecca on the phone in the backyard. She was talking to someone about guardianship laws. Said once they had medical documentation of cognitive decline, the process would be straightforward. My hands were shaking as I reached for my coffee cup. They've been planning this for weeks. Months, Miguel corrected. Mrs. Sandra, this goes back even further than I initially realized. He opened an older notebook, one with a worn cover and pages that had been turned many times. September 8th, he read. Mrs. Rebecca brought a man to look at the house while you were at your doctor's appointment. Told him she was researching property values for insurance purposes. I remembered that doctor's appointment. It was just a routine checkup, but Rebecca had insisted on driving me, saying she was concerned about my reflexes. September 23rd, Miguel continued. Mrs. Margaret visited with paperwork. Spent over an hour in your kitchen, asking you to sign various documents. Said they were updates to your insurance policies. My blood ran cold. I remember those papers. She said they were routine updates. I trusted her. Do you have copies? I shook my head. She said she'd send them to me later, but she never did. Miguel made a note in his current notebook. We need to find out what you actually signed. October 7th, he continued reading. Mr. Thomas brought a doctor friend to dinner. Dr. Peterson. They spent a long time discussing age-related cognitive decline and how families should handle it. I remembered Dr. Peterson. He was a psychiatrist, though at the time I thought it was just a social visit. He had asked me a lot of questions about my memory, my daily routines, whether I ever felt confused or disoriented. He was evaluating me, I whispered. Right there at my own dinner table. Miguel nodded grimly. And Mrs. Rebecca recorded the conversation. I saw her with her phone, pretending to take photos of dessert. The scope of their deception was staggering. Every interaction, every visit, every seemingly innocent conversation had been part of their plan. There's more, Miguel said, reaching for a different notebook. About the accidents. What accidents? The fall you had in October. The one where you bruised your ribs. I remembered that fall. I had been coming down the stairs and suddenly felt dizzy. I grabbed for the banister but missed and tumbled down the last 4 steps. I found something in the stairwell the next day, Miguel said quietly. A small amount of cooking oil on the 3rd step from the bottom. Just a few drops, but enough to make someone slip. My stomach lurched. Someone put oil on my stairs? And the medication mix-up last month. When you ended up in the emergency room because your blood pressure medication made you violently ill. I remembered that night vividly. I had taken my usual evening medications and within an hour was vomiting uncontrollably and feeling faint. Rebecca had driven me to the hospital, playing the part of the concerned daughter-in-law perfectly. The doctor said there was a mix-up at the pharmacy, I said. I checked with the pharmacy the next day, Miguel said. There was no mix-up. Someone had replaced your regular medication with a different one. One that would interact badly with your blood pressure medicine. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They were poisoning me. Not to kill you directly, Miguel explained. But to create incidents that would support their claims about your declining health and mental state. I thought about all the times in recent months when I had felt confused, dizzy, or unwell. How many of those episodes had been artificially induced? The gas leak that never happened, the repeated phone calls I never made, the falls that weren't accidents, I said, ticking off each item on my fingers. They orchestrated everything. Miguel nodded. And Mrs. Margaret has been documenting everything. Every incident, every supposed symptom. Building a medical history they can present to authorities. What about the doctor she mentioned? The one who's going to evaluate me. Miguel's expression darkened. Dr. Richard Carlisle. He's not just any doctor, Mrs. Sandra. He's Mrs. Margaret's brother-in-law. And he's been involved in several cases where elderly people were declared incompetent under questionable circumstances. The conspiracy was bigger than I had imagined. It wasn't just my family trying to take advantage of me, they had professional help, people who made their living preying on vulnerable seniors. There's one more thing, Miguel said, his voice barely above a whisper. About Mr. Thomas's finances. What? About them? He's in trouble, Mrs. Sandra. Serious financial trouble. The business he started with Mrs. Rebecca's brother, it's failing. They owe money to investors, money they don't have. That explained so much. The urgency of their plan, the risks they were willing to take, the calculated cruelty of their approach. How much do they owe? From what I overheard, close to $800,000. Money they borrowed against expected inheritance. They had spent my money before they even had it, and now they were desperate to get their hands on my assets before their creditors came calling. Mrs. Sandra, Miguel said, reaching across the table to take my hand. There's something else you need to know about me. I looked at him, wondering what other revelations this day would bring. I haven't just been observing all this, he said. I've been suffering from it too. What do you mean? Mrs. Rebecca has been making my life hell for months. Cutting my salary without telling you, claiming you approved it. Threatening to have me fired if I didn't cooperate with their plans. I felt a surge of anger. I never approved any salary cuts. I know that now. But she convinced me you were becoming forgetful about finances. She said the family was worried about you being taken advantage of by household help. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They had been manipulating Miguel. Just as they had been manipulating me, using our mutual loyalty and concern against us. She wanted me gone, Miguel continued. She said once they had control of your affairs, they wouldn't need a gardener anymore. The property would be sold, and I'd be out on the street. Over my dead body, I said, surprising myself with the vehemence in my voice. Miguel smiled for the first time since this conversation began. That's exactly what they were hoping for, Mrs. Sandra. As we sat there in his small apartment, looking out at the house where my family was probably going through my belongings and planning their next moves, I realized something important. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a woman with allies. With evidence, and with a deep understanding of exactly what I was up against. The question now wasn't whether I could stop them, it was how completely I was going to destroy their plans and make them pay for what they had tried to do to me. And to Miguel. Miguel and I spent the rest of Christmas Day planning our counterattack. While my family celebrated in my house, believing they had successfully eliminated the biggest obstacle to their scheme, we were gathering the evidence that would expose their conspiracy. First, we need to get into your house without them knowing. Miguel said as we watched Thomas's car finally pull out of my driveway around 3 in the afternoon. They'll be back, probably tonight, to stage their discovery of your disappearance. The thought chilled me. They would return, pretend to be shocked and devastated to find me missing, then launch into their predetermined narrative about my declining mental state and tragic wandering into the storm. I know another way in, Miguel said. The basement. Window on the north side. The latch has been broken for months. We waited until dusk, when the neighbors would be inside having their own Christmas dinners. Miguel helped me through the narrow basement window, both of us moving as quietly as possible. Inside my own house, I felt like a burglar. Everything looked the same, but it felt contaminated somehow, knowing what my family had planned for me here. What are we looking for exactly? I whispered as we crept up the basement stairs. Documentation, Miguel replied. The papers Mrs. Margaret had you sign. Phone records. Medication bottles. Anything that proves their story doesn't match reality. In my kitchen, I found the first piece of evidence. My pill organizer, which I filled every Sunday with my weekly medications, had been tampered with. The compartments for the past 3 days contained pills I didn't recognize mixed in with my regular ones. Miguel, I called softly. Look at this. He examined the unfamiliar pills carefully. We need to take photos and keep samples. These could be what's been making you feel confused and dizzy. I thought about all the times in recent weeks when I had felt off balance or foggy after taking my evening medications. How long had they been drugging me? In my home office, we found a treasure trove of evidence. Rebecca had been using my computer, probably thinking I would never notice. My browser history showed searches for elderly cognitive decline symptoms, legal guardianship requirements, and power of attorney for incompetent person. Even more damaging were the printed emails she had left in my printer tray. Messages to Dr. Carlisle detailing my supposed symptoms and requesting an expedited competency evaluation. Emails to a real estate agent asking for a market analysis of my property. Communications with an estate attorney about the fastest way to gain control of an elderly relative's assets. She was sloppy, Miguel observed as we photographed every page. She thought you'd be dead by now, so it wouldn't matter if you found these. In the folder where I kept my important papers, we discovered that several documents were missing. My original will, the deed to my house, my insurance policies, and my bank statements from the past 6 months. They took them, I said, feeling violated. They took my personal papers out of my own house. But they missed something, Miguel said, pointing to a folder labeled taxes that had been pushed to the back of the filing cabinet. Inside were copies of all my financial documents. including bank statements showing regular transfers from my accounts to pay for Thomas's failed business ventures. The amounts were staggering. Over the past year, I had unknowingly funded nearly $300,000 of Thomas's debts. The transfers had been made electronically, with forged authorizations bearing my signature. I never approved these, I said, studying the paperwork. I didn't even know about most of these payments. Miguel pointed to the dates. Look when they started. Right after Mrs. Margaret had you sign those insurance updates in September. The documents she had me sign weren't insurance updates at all. They were financial authorizations giving Thomas access to my accounts. We found more evidence in my bedroom. A small recording device had been hidden inside my alarm clock, probably placed there to capture any conversations that might be used against me later. My telephone had been tapped as well, with a small device attached to the base that would record all incoming and outgoing calls. They've been monitoring everything, I realized. Every phone call, every conversation I had in my bedroom. In Thomas's old room, which Rebecca used as an office when she visited, we hit the jackpot. She had left her laptop open, still logged into her email account. The emails revealed the full scope of their plan. Messages between Rebecca, Thomas, and Margaret dating back 6 months, discussing different strategies for gaining control of my assets. They had considered various approaches, from simple financial manipulation to staging an accident, before settling on the gradual incompetency plan as the safest option. One email from Margaret to Rebecca made my blood boil. The key is patience. We build the medical record slowly, create a pattern of incidents, then have Richard evaluate her. Once she's declared incompetent, Thomas gets power of attorney and we can do whatever we want with the property. Sandra will be safely tucked away in a facility where she can't cause problems. Another email from Rebecca to Thomas was even more chilling. Your mother is stronger than we thought. The medication isn't affecting her as much as we hoped. We might need to increase the dosage or find another way to accelerate the process. They had been systematically poisoning me, and when that wasn't working fast enough, they had escalated to more dangerous methods. Miguel, I said, my voice shaking with rage, they were planning to kill me all along. The incompetency thing was just backup in case I survived their other attempts. We found financial records showing that Thomas and Rebecca had already started spending money they expected to inherit. Credit card statements revealed expensive purchases, jewelry, vacations, a new car, all charged against credit lines they had opened using my house as collateral. They had mortgaged my home without my knowledge, taken out loans against my life insurance policy, and even opened credit cards in my name. The total debt they had accumulated was over $1 million. They're not just stealing from you, Miguel realized as we went through the numbers. They're destroying your financial future. Even if their plan failed, you'd be left with crushing debt. In a folder marked medical, we found the most disturbing evidence yet. Dr. Carlisle had already prepared his evaluation report, dated for next week, declaring me mentally incompetent due to advanced dementia. The report was based on observations provided by my family and included recommendations for immediate guardianship and residential care. The evaluation was a sham. He had never even met me, yet he was prepared to swear under oath that I was mentally unfit to manage my own affairs. This is fraud, I said, staring at the pre-written report. Medical fraud, financial fraud, attempted murder. And elder abuse, Miguel added. The authorities take that very seriously. As we gathered our evidence and prepared to leave through the basement window again, I felt a mixture of rage and determination I had never experienced before. My own son, the child I had raised and sacrificed for, had tried to kill me for money. He had enlisted his wife and her mother in a conspiracy that would have left me either dead or locked away in an institution while they spent my life savings, but they had underestimated 2 things. Miguel's loyalty and attention to detail, and my own strength once I understood what I was really fighting against. What's our next step? I asked Miguel as we made our way back to his apartment with our evidence. We call the police, he said. And we call a real lawyer. Someone who specializes in elder abuse cases. What if they don't believe us? What if Thomas and Rebecca convince them that I'm the one who's confused? Miguel smiled grimly. Mrs. Sandra, we have documented evidence of financial fraud, medical fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy. We have recordings, emails, forged documents, and witness testimony. Thomas and Rebecca are about to discover that they're not as smart as they thought they were. As I lay down in Miguel's spare bed that night, I realized that tomorrow would be the beginning of the end for my family's conspiracy. They thought they had won, thought they had successfully eliminated me from the equation. They had no idea that their victim had become their worst nightmare, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything she needed to destroy them completely. The only question now was whether I would be satisfied with simple justice, or whether I would make them pay for every moment of fear, every act of betrayal, and every day of suffering they had inflicted on both Miguel and me. The next morning, December 26th, Miguel and I sat in the office of attorney Patricia Wells, a woman who specialized in elder abuse cases. She was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner that immediately put me at ease. "Mrs. Morrison," she said after reviewing all our evidence, "this is one of the most comprehensive elder abuse cases I've ever seen. The level of planning and premeditation is extraordinary." I watched as she organized the photographs, documents, and Miguel's detailed notebooks into neat piles on her desk. "What happens now?" "Now we contact Detective Sarah Chen at the county sheriff's office. She heads their elder abuse task force." Ms. Wells picked up her phone. "Sarah, I have a case you need to see immediately." "Yes, it's that urgent." Within 2 hours, Detective Chen was sitting in the attorney's office, reviewing our evidence with the same sharp attention Ms. Wells had shown. "The recorded conversations alone would be enough for conspiracy charges," Detective Chen said, studying transcripts Miguel had made of conversations he had overheard. "But combined with the financial fraud, the medical fraud, and the attempted poisoning, we're looking at multiple felonies." "What about the fact that they locked me out in the storm?" I asked. "That was attempted murder, wasn't it?" Detective Chen nodded grimly. "Attempted murder in the first degree. Premeditated and with malice aforethought. The email evidence shows they planned it specifically hoping for your death." Ms. Wells leaned forward. "How do you want to handle this, Sandra? We can have them arrested immediately, or we can let them make their next move and catch them in the act." I thought about Thomas, probably sitting in his house right now, convinced that his plan had worked perfectly. Rebecca was likely already making appointments to view my furniture, planning how to redecorate once they had control of my house. "I want to catch them in the act," I said. "I want them to reveal themselves completely." Detective Chen smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. We've used this approach before in elder abuse cases. We let the perpetrators think they're succeeding, then document everything they do." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would remain missing for a few more days, staying at Miguel's apartment while police surveillance teams monitored my house and recorded everything my family did. Meanwhile, Detective Chen would work with the district attorney to prepare warrants for their arrest. "They'll probably file a missing person report sometime today," Detective Chen explained. "Standard procedure would be for them to wait 24 hours, but given the weather and your supposed mental condition, they might do it sooner." She was right. At 2:30 that afternoon, Thomas called the sheriff's office to report that his elderly, confused mother had vanished during a family argument the night before. To Miguel and I listened from his apartment as the responding officers took Thomas's statement in my backyard. Even from a distance, we could see Rebecca dabbing at her eyes with tissues, playing the part of the distraught daughter-in-law. "She seemed so confused lately," Thomas told the officers, his voice carrying clearly in the cold air. "Repeating herself, forgetting conversations. We were trying to help her, but she got angry and went outside. We thought she had just gone for a walk to cool down." "When did you realize she was missing?" one of the officers asked. "This morning," Rebecca answered, her voice trembling with fake emotion. "We found the doors unlocked and no sign of her anywhere. We've been searching all day." Margaret stepped forward, the picture of a concerned family member. "Officer, I'm a retired nurse. Sandra has been showing clear signs of dementia for months. In weather like this, with her mental state, I'm afraid the worst might have happened." I watched through Miguel's window as they played their roles perfectly, each one reinforcing the narrative they had constructed. If I hadn't known the truth, if Miguel hadn't witnessed their conspiracy, I would have believed them myself. The officers took photos of my house, documented the unlocked doors, and began organizing a search party. By evening, half the neighborhood was out looking for me, calling my name in the woods behind my house. "This is hard to watch," I told Miguel as we observed the search from his window. "All those people worried about me, looking for me in the cold." "They're good people," Miguel replied. "They care about you. It's your family who are the monsters." That night, with police surveillance cameras now installed around my property, Thomas, Rebecca, and Margaret held what they thought was a private family meeting in my living room. Detective Chen had given Miguel and me a radio so we could listen to the live audio feed from the bugs the police had placed in my house. "How long do we wait before we start the legal proceedings?" Rebecca's voice came through clearly. "The search will continue for at least a week," Margaret replied. "But we can begin the process now. I'll call Richard tomorrow and have him submit his evaluation." "What if they find her alive?" Thomas asked, and there was something in his voice, not hope, but worry. "They won't," Margaret said coldly. "Not after a night like last night. At her age, with her condition, exposure would have killed her within hours." "And if by some miracle she survived?" Rebecca pressed. Then we proceed with Plan B, Margaret answered. Richard's evaluation will show she's mentally incompetent. The exposure and trauma will have made her condition worse. We can have her committed immediately. Listening to them discuss my death with such clinical detachment was surreal. These were people who had eaten at my table, people I had cooked for and cared about. I've already contacted the estate attorney, Thomas said. As soon as she's declared legally dead, we can begin probate proceedings. The house can be sold within 60 days. What about the gardener? Rebecca asked. He might cause problems. Miguel? Thomas laughed dismissively. He's got nowhere else to go. We'll give him a small severance and he'll disappear. He's too grateful to cause trouble. Miguel's jaw tightened as we listened. They had no idea he was the one who had documented their entire conspiracy. Over the next 3 days, we listened as they systematically began dismantling my life. Rebecca spent hours in my house, going through my belongings and making lists of what to keep and what to sell. Thomas met with real estate agents and got appraisals on my property. Margaret worked on the legal documentation to have me declared dead and Thomas appointed as executor of my estate. They never once expressed genuine grief or remorse. Every conversation was about money, about timelines, about how to maximize their profit from my disappearance. On the 4th day, Dr. Carlisle arrived at my house to submit his fraudulent medical evaluation. The police recorded everything as he backdated documents and created a false medical history to support the family's claims about my mental incompetence. This gives us medical fraud charges against Dr. Carlisle as well, Detective Chen told us. His license will be revoked, and he'll face criminal charges for falsifying medical records. That evening, as Thomas and Rebecca celebrated their success with expensive champagne in my dining room, Detective Chen made the call I had been waiting for. All units, we have authorization for arrests. Move in now. Miguel and I watched from his window as police cars surrounded my house. Officers with battering rams broke down my front door just as Thomas was raising his glass in a toast. The look of shock on their faces was worth every moment of fear and betrayal I had endured. Rebecca dropped her champagne glass, and it shattered on my hardwood floor. Margaret tried to run toward the back door, but officers were already there waiting for her. Thomas just stood there, his mouth open, as Detective Chen read him his rights. Thomas Morrison, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, financial fraud, elder abuse, and falsifying legal documents. As they led my son away in handcuffs, he saw Miguel and me watching from the apartment window. The look he gave us was pure hatred, the mask of the loving son finally torn away completely. Rebecca was screaming about how this was all a misunderstanding, how they had only been trying to help me. Margaret maintained her dignity until the very end, saying nothing as they placed her in the police car. Dr. Carlisle was arrested at his office the next morning, caught with falsified medical records and evidence of his involvement in the conspiracy. It's over, Detective Chen told us as we watched the last police car drive away with my family inside. The district attorney says this is the strongest elder abuse case they've ever prosecuted. With all the evidence we've collected, they're looking at decades in prison. Standing in my house again, surrounded by the evidence of their betrayal but finally safe, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, peace. But as I looked around at the home they had violated, at the life they had tried to steal, I realized that justice was only the beginning. There were still consequences to be dealt with, debts to be settled, and a future to be rebuilt. Most importantly, there was Miguel, the man who had saved my life and suffered alongside me, who deserved far more than the small severance Thomas had planned to give him. It was time to make some changes, and this time, I would be the one in control. 6 months after the arrests, I sat in the same courthouse where Thomas, Rebecca, and Margaret had been sentenced to prison terms ranging from 15 to 25 years. Today was different, though. Today was about hope, not justice. Mrs. Morrison, the judge said with a warm smile, it's unusual to see cases like this in my courtroom. Usually, elder abuse cases end in tragedy. But your case has become something quite remarkable. I glanced over at Miguel, who was sitting in the front row wearing his best suit. He looked nervous but proud as the judge continued speaking. The financial recovery in your case was exceptional, the judge noted. Can you tell me how you decided to use the restitution funds? I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in years. Your Honor, for 20 years, Miguel Herrera was more than just my employee. He was my friend, my protector, and ultimately, he saved my life. During all those years, he was underpaid, overworked, and finally threatened and humiliated by my own family. The courtroom was quiet as I continued. The money my son and his accomplices stole from me has been recovered, plus damages. But money can't give back the years of loyalty Miguel showed me, or erase the suffering my family put him through. Miguel wiped his eyes as I explained my decision to the court. I'm establishing the Herrera Gardening Company as a full partnership, I announced. Miguel will own 50% of the business we're creating together. We've purchased a small property outside town where we'll live and work, growing flowers and vegetables to sell at the farmer's market. The judge nodded approvingly. And what about your family home? Sold, I said simply. I couldn't live there anymore, knowing what they had planned for me in that house. The proceeds, along with the restitution money, will fund our new life. After the hearing, Miguel and I drove out to our new property, 10 acres of rolling hills with a modest farmhouse and several greenhouses. It was everything we had dreamed about during those long months while the legal case played out. I still can't believe this is real, Miguel said as we walked through the largest greenhouse, where tomato plants were already reaching toward the glass ceiling. It's real, I assured him. And it's ours. We had spent the winter months planning this new life. Miguel had incredible knowledge about plants and farming that had been wasted during his years as just a gardener. Now he was applying that expertise to build something that belonged to both of us. The farmer's market applications have been approved, I told him as we checked on the seedlings we had started for spring planting. We'll have our booth starting in May. Miguel smiled, the genuine happiness on his face making all the legal battles and painful revelations of the past year worthwhile. What should we call ourselves? Well, I said, thinking about it, you're the master gardener, and I'm still learning. How about Miguel's Garden, with Sandra? He laughed, shaking his head. No, Mrs. Sandra. We are partners now. Equal partners. It should be Herrera Morrison Gardens. The sound of our names together, linked as business partners and friends, brought tears to my eyes. As spring turned into summer, our little business flourished. The vegetables Miguel grew were the best at the farmer's market, and my flower arrangements became popular with local wedding planners. We worked side by side every day, and for the first time in decades, I woke up each morning excited about what the day would bring. The farmhouse had become a real home, not just a place to live. Miguel had converted the sunroom into a workshop where I learned to make pottery planters for our flowers. I had turned the largest bedroom into a library where Miguel could study new farming techniques and plant varieties. We ate dinner together every evening, sharing stories about our customers, planning new crops, and sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence on the front porch, watching the sunset over our fields. Do you ever regret it? Miguel asked me one evening as we watched fireflies dance around our vegetable garden. Giving up your old life, the big house, the social status? I thought about his question seriously. My old life had included a son who tried to kill me, a daughter-in-law who drugged me, and a social circle that had been built on appearances rather than genuine friendships. The only thing I regret, I said finally, is that it took me so long to realize that the life I thought I wanted was actually a prison. Miguel nodded thoughtfully. I used to think I was lucky to have a job and a place to live. I never imagined I could have a real future. We both deserved better, I said. We just had to be brave enough to take it. Word of our story had spread through the community, and we often had visitors who came not just to buy vegetables, but to hear about how we had overcome elder abuse and built something positive from the ashes of betrayal. A local newspaper had written an article about us, calling our partnership a testament to the power of loyalty and friendship. The attention had brought more customers, but also something more valuable, connections with other seniors who had faced similar struggles with their families. One afternoon, a woman named Dorothy came to our market booth with tears in her eyes. My daughter is trying to take my house, she told us quietly. She says I'm too old to live alone. But I think she just wants to sell it and take the money. Miguel and I exchanged glances. We had discussed this possibility, that our experience might help others who were facing similar situations. Have you talked to anyone about it? I asked Dorothy. A lawyer, the police, anyone? She shook her head. She's my daughter. I keep thinking she'll change her mind, that she really does care about me. I took Dorothy's hands in mine. I thought the same thing about my son. But sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. We spent an hour talking with Dorothy, giving her the contact information for Detective Chen and Attorney Wells, sharing our story and encouraging her to trust her instincts. You saved my life once, I told Miguel that evening. Maybe now we can help save others. As autumn arrived and our first full year of partnership drew to a close, I received a letter that I had been both dreading and anticipating. It was from Thomas, writing from prison. Mom, the letter began, and I almost stopped reading right there. After everything he had done, he still expected to claim that relationship. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened. I want you to know that I'm sorry. I never meant for things to go so far. Rebecca and her mother convinced me that we were helping you, that you needed someone to make decisions for you. I set the letter down, feeling a familiar mixture of anger and sadness. Even now, even after being convicted of trying to murder me, Thomas was still trying to shift the blame to others, Miguel found me sitting on the porch, staring at the letter. "Bad news?" he asked, settling into his chair beside me. Thomas wrote. "To me. He says he's sorry." Miguel was quiet for a moment. "Do you believe him?" I thought about it honestly. I think he's sorry he got caught. I think he's sorry his plan didn't work. But I don't think he's truly sorry for what he tried to do. To me. "What will you do?" I looked out over our fields, where the last of the summer vegetables were ready for harvest. In the distance, I could see the lights of the farmhouse where I had found peace and purpose with a man who had shown me more loyalty and kindness than my own blood family ever had. "Nothing," I said, folding the letter and putting it back in its envelope. "I have a life to live now, and it doesn't include people who tried to destroy me." That night, I threw Thomas's letter into our fireplace and watched it burn. As the flames consumed his words, I felt the last chains of my old life finally break away. The next morning, Miguel and I started planting our crops for the following year. We had requests from 3 restaurants who wanted to buy our organic vegetables, and a local florist had asked us to grow specialty flowers for her wedding business. "We're going to need to expand the greenhouses," Miguel said, studying our order list. "Then we'll expand them," I said, feeling excited about the challenge. "This is our business, our future. We can make it whatever we want it to be." As I watched Miguel sketch out plans for our expansion, I realized that the greatest revenge against the people who had tried to destroy me wasn't their imprisonment or the money they had been forced to repay. The greatest revenge was this: I was happy. Truly, genuinely happy for the first time in decades. I had a partner who valued me, work that fulfilled me, and a future that belonged entirely to me and the people I chose to share it with. Thomas and Rebecca and Margaret had tried to take everything from me, but in the end, they had given me the greatest gift of all: the courage to walk away from a life that was slowly killing me and build something beautiful in its place. As the sun set over Herrera Morrison Gardens, painting our fields gold in the evening light, I knew that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, surrounded by people who truly care about you, and sometimes, the family you choose is so much better than the family you were born into.